Hi, everybody. Yuval here, Chief Strategy Officer at Nectar, and I'm here with Andy Malone. Andy, why don't you give a quick intro?
Yep, my name is Andy Malone. I'm Senior Vice President of Client Services here at Nectar. I have the pleasure of getting to work with our retail media team, our digital marketing team, our Amazon account management department, as well as our creative studio based in New Jersey.
So, thanks a lot for joining us. A really great topic. No matter if you sell on Amazon or marketplaces, the topic of 1P, 3P, the benefits, the desire to go hybrid is always top of mind for any brands that we worked with. Between myself and Andy, we've worked with over 300 to 400 brands across the last few years. And we've come across this scenario quite a bit. So we're excited to walk you through some of the things that we've learned, the pros and cons, the thing to think about, and also as we transition from 1P to 3P or vice versa, some of the best practices that can go a long way.
Definitely. Definitely. The rules are consistently changing with Amazon regarding this. It used to be a lot more concrete, one or the other, but since then, the rules are starting to really change. So I think with that, you need to be skeptical any time that one person tells you one model is the model. One or 3P, you'll oftentimes hear you'll get more profitability. 1P, sometimes you feel like you just have to do that. But in this journey, we'll be kind of looking at what the different models can go and provide to your business, pros, cons, and how for you to navigate to going to the right one for you.
Yeah, and we'll quickly define those for you, 1P, 3P. What does that mean? Important thing to call out, in my opinion, is that 1P is not going anywhere. There's rumors that Amazon is closing out 1P. That's not the case. If anything, maybe they've been shedding the small brands that are on 1P that probably should not have been and focusing on larger sizes brands that do a little bit more volume. But Vendor Central 1P is not going anywhere. Neither are the frustrations of working with Vendor Central that will also remain. The limitations of Vendor Central platform seems to be here to stick as well, even though we hear promises all the time about enhancements that are meant to be rolling out. Maybe Andy, you can talk through differences in vendor and seller.
Yeah. So why don't we go first look at just the differences between the two models? First one, 1P. Big takeaways from this one is you sell wholesale to Amazon. So you will be giving them, they will be giving you POs, you will fulfill those to the best of your ability. They will own the buy box, which this will come into a lot of different brand strategies. So that is something to just acknowledge them doing that. But also they set your retail price, which for some brands is totally fine. And others, we're going to kind of explore why that might not be the best thing. The other aspect is you get the credibility of sold by Amazon. In certain categories, in certain areas, that little additional badge can give you additional conversion, just overall, and something to kind of consider when picking your model. For seller, you do the list price, and you sell directly to the shopper. From that, you do own the buy box, or more so how to go and uh, get that sale on the respective listing. You'll also be managing your inventory. This will come into play quite a bit in consideration, especially once we start factoring in those storage fees. You have more control on your margin upside, but you do carry more of the operational and inventory workload.
Yeah, and honestly, a quick teaser here. I think there's more risks with going to Vendor Central than sometimes can be benefits. And what I mean by that is any operational challenges you have. See, you give a lot of agency away when you go Vendor Central. Essentially, your agency is around filling POs, sending your products. So if you want no headache, and you want to have fewer control mechanisms in place, then vendor can give you that. The problem with this is if you got pricing challenges you're trying to modify or price increases that you want to instill, Vendor Central is not, it makes it really difficult to better control your margins. And as a result of that, you just have a lot less flexibility, in my opinion. And that creates a lot of risk, right? In business, you want flexibility, flexibility to adjust, to pivot, to introduce products or remove products. And Vendor Central just does not make that easy, in my opinion. And that's a great risk to businesses. So we can go through some of the specific nuances here very quickly to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Excellent point, Yuval. And yeah, in the slides to come as well, we'll kind of be exploring when would it make sense for 1P, understanding that more of that rigidness that they have and the potential concerns of what it could do to your margins. Um, some areas it actually is the better approach, but in other times it is not. So having that critical thinking of thinking which model would be best for your products is very important. And we'll be kind of going and exploring that a little bit further on in this presentation. So real quick, just like how do they actually differ? We'll kind of just go over this high level. Who sets a price? Amazon will be controlling your retail price versus in 1P versus in 3P, you have that ability. Margin, it is a wholesale. And then they have co-op fees and chargebacks. Though with the 3P, you have a higher gross margin, but you pay additional fees, such as storage and fulfillment, which will kind of go into the nuances of the pros and cons to that as well. Cash flow have payment terms, which typically are 60 to 90, typically leaning in the 90 these days. While 3P, you get payout much quicker, typically within 2 to 4 weeks. Fulfillment, Amazon handles it end to end. So that goes into that simplicity that Yuval was talking about of just the 1P model versus with 3P, you will be managing your FBA and FBM and having different aspects of that process overall that you'll need a staff for. Buy box, Amazon owns it, makes it fairly convenient. But for some brands, if you do 3P, you will have to win it and you will have to build out the strategies for that.
Yeah.
Maverick,
So,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, I was gonna say biggest takeaways, you cannot adjust your price easily on 1P. You lose some margin control as a result of that. Some brands like 1P because if they're selling typically wholesale with other retailers, it aligns with their P&L and its existing same business model. But in my opinion, that's a lazy reasoning because it's essentially saying, hey, I don't want to learn a new approach of doing things. I don't want to introduce complexity to my P&L reporting from a financial standpoint. And that's why I'm going 1P. That's really not the reasons why you should be doing it. It should be really driven by your business dynamics, your operational limitations, and more importantly, which model is more profitable because they both have different fees introduced to them. And sometimes 3P will be much more profitable than 1P. And sometimes 1P will be more profitable than 3P, specifically in bulky, larger items where FBA fees are much higher in 3P.
Which
The
that's
biggest frustration.
actually, oh, I was going to say that is actually a beautiful segue into the next slide.
Yeah.
Um, if
Uh,
because we go into that exact breakdown of the pros and cons of 1P versus 3P.
And then one
Um,
of the big frustrations I would say also that we see with clients obviously is around POs. You will never get the PO quantities and the timing on your POs and the predictability that you want. That's just a deep frustration every brand has. It's very hard to forecast. Even if Amazon gives you a forecast, they don't necessarily stay true to it, so that just comes with the territory of working with a gorilla.
That is very true. And we do have those frustrations and those stressors for some of our partners that do work with 1P, where all of a sudden you are in your prime season, you are busy, and Amazon's POs are not aligning with your sales expectations. It could add a lot of stress and a lot of tension overall, and oftentimes requires a lot of negotiations. So that is a pain point for sure when it comes to that. Or like then if like for whatever reason you're not able to fulfill based on their POs, you could potentially get dinged for that as well. So it requires you to be a bit more flexible in certain degrees to be able to meet that demand. So with that though, why would you want 1P then? Typically, it is for the high velocity items that are very predictable. These are your flagship items that you're selling thousands of, and you need that operational efficiency to ensure that you're not bogging down your workforce. I was actually a brand manager for years, and it was probably one of my highest honors when I would get a 3P brand to want to kind of qualify for 1P because their ASINs were getting so much velocity. So in those type of scenarios, 1P can be beneficial. Then that goes with the operational simplicity, where when you are selling thousands, tens of thousands of units, sometimes less is more. That sold by Amazon feature. Now, in certain areas at certain price points, that sold by Amazon gives people the assurance that the product is quality and it will achieve what it needs to achieve. So that can matter when you're talking about conquesting in your respective categories. But that once again kind of depends on the products. Cash flows and inventory risks constraints. This is where Amazon owns the inventory. So when you think about on the brand side of you keeping 60 to 90 days with the inventory and what that does to your P&L internally, it's really nice when Amazon just gives you a big PO and that is just off your books. It does come with other pain points, but it is pretty beneficial. And then in some scenarios, 3P is just not more cost effective. When we factor in storage fees, but more importantly, shipping fees, some products at certain price points, just it's actually more cost effective to do the 1P approach.
Hmm. So a couple of takeaways and reactions I'm seeing here. When we talk about high predictable velocity, if you got seasonal products, that would scare me going to 1P. We see a lot
Mhm.
of brands that are very seasonal that are in 1P. The problem with this is if the POs don't come in and you don't have the right inventory levels, then you're going to be putting yourself at risk. The worst thing that ever happens is you going out of stock at Amazon. So if you are 1P with very seasonal products, ideally you're a hybrid and you have a 3P backup store that you can do FBA. You can always do FBM, fulfilled by merchant, and as a backup, but that can impact delivery timelines. The retail credibility, Andy, with the sold by Amazon, I don't know that you get a significant lift. Ships from Amazon already gets a really good badge. I don't know how measurable that benefit is in your experience. I wouldn't necessarily make that decision solely on that for sure.
Oh, no, 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 no. Actually, we'll go into the rubric of the
Yeah.
different considerations and factors. We like to make these decisions
Yeah.
very much data driven. And they have different measurements and KPIs based upon it. And you put different weights into each one of those to find the perfect kind of solution. So that's a really good point, Yuval, in just that you wouldn't want to put all of your eggs in that basket. I'm typically thinking about lower price point consumable items,
Mhm.
where people are less brand
So
loyal.
yeah,
Then
I totally agree there. Like, so that's a really good point that you're making. And specifically, if you're a low ASP, a product that's not well suited for e-commerce, right? Because you got shipping fees and you're giving commissions, and if you got a product that's at 15 ASP, uh, it's hard to make profit on $15 selling in e-commerce. That's probably better in 1P because the co-op rates, you're going to probably end up with better margin. Same thing when you got very expensive things to ship, probably might be better in 1P. One thing that I want to really make sure we're thoughtful of is it's easier to go from 3P to 1P. It's very hard to get out of 1P. It's doable. It's a lot more effort, takes a lot more time. So you cannot make that decision lightly. And whatever contracts you negotiate into when you get into 1P, you're going to be stuck with those for a long time because that will be the relative basis by which negotiations take place. And you're going to have a really hard time negotiating with, Amazon's going to want to increase their fees every year with you in negotiation periods for 1P. So it's something you have to be really cognizant of. It's only going to get more expensive and not cheaper every year.
yes. Excellent, excellent point, Yuval. And I do see a lot of our brand partners experiencing that frustration. Definitely read the fine print when you're going into Amazon. This is actually something that we do work with quite a few of our partners on, is we'll kind of support them through these conversations just because it could be potentially dangerous and you might be signing yourself up for a world of hurt if you're not careful. So that is something where we like to really hold their hand through that journey to ensure that we're not painting ourselves in a corner.
Hmm.
So with that, that goes into when you 3P makes sense. Probably one of the biggest ones is setting map price. If you're one of those brands that have other very important retail partners, you understand how critical respecting map is. And if for whatever reason Amazon does not respect those prices, then it could go and put your respective relationships intention. So that is when you want to control the price. Even maximize margin, like just in general, that is a very powerful tool. They have even these things that are pricing rules that I'm obsessed with that you occasionally can even kind of determine your price based upon the different offers, the different variables of how people are seeing it, which then gives you the ultimate amount of control.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
And there's a deeper one as well, Andy, that you're alluding to here, which is the pricing isn't just within Amazon, it's within your other retailers. So if you're doing a lot of promotions with your other retailers, if you have have a hard time aligning pricing with your other retailers, going 1P is going to be really, really tough, and you should absolutely go 3P because it means you're going to have a lot more control over your price. On 1P, Amazon can easily remove the buy box, and all of a sudden you can't sell your products because Amazon's not making a profit. That will never happen in 3P. So you can
mhm,
really have much more control over that dynamic, and that's really critical. Who does not want pricing and margin manipulation and control when selling products? It's one of the most important levers you have in business.
100%. And I have been able to successfully scale brands consistently, and that is one of the strongest levers that we have. And once again, it just allows you to have harmony with your other retail partners, which is very important.
And I'll
The
emphasize
other
one more thing because I just very passionate topic for me where I've seen a lot of pain from brands. When you try to raise your prices on 1P, Amazon will make it very, very difficult. So let's say you want to pass through price increases because of tariffs. You're going to be in a world of pain trying to go from $22 ASP to $24 ASP. So you want to be able to react, when your cost of goods are changing, your taxes and your tariffs are changing, and this past year, very volatile dynamics. You're not going to be able to do that in 1P. You have to absorb these fees. That becomes very expensive.
100%, 100%. Just kind of going off of some of the other ones. So agility to market, more often than not, you're going to see that your new product launches don't time up with your vendor negotiation cycles. If you want to go and launch products, you'll want to launch it when it makes sense with your other retailers, et cetera. And so this gives you a lot more nimbleness to launch those respective products overall versus having to work with 1P and to kind of scale it like kind of more grandiose. You do also get more customer data. I was a client learning analyst for years prior, so I know how valuable the data of your customers are, and you understand more of the nuances of their shopping habits and how they go to the they interact with your different product lines, which can be very valuable when it comes to merchandising strategies. Finally, I was brand site for a while there as well, and I know that what it's like when you in your company have the people to deal with inventory that can go and deal with cases, can deal with the respective operational aspects that 1P wouldn't necessarily provide you. So if you already have those resources and you could easily absorb it, you then all of a sudden unlock all of these additional benefits as well as margin. So if you already have that, it might just make sense for you to just lean into the 3P.
Yep. Anything else? Should we move
Oh,
on?
I'm sorry. Nope. Which is actually kind of goes into our next section, which is what we're seeing more and more with our partners, which is the rise of the hybrid. It used to be back in the day, not to date myself, but it used to be one or the other. But what we are seeing is that oftentimes that we are needing the acceleration ability of 1P for certain key ASINs and SKUs, but we also need the flexibility and the increased margin on other ones of 3P for different SKUs. And so oftentimes we will kind of look at a different rubric of your different products of which ones make sense for which ones. And now you've all also alluded to it is very challenging to get out of 1P. So we also help with that kind of dance of how you can move items from 1P to 3P. But in general, we're finding that our partners have a lot healthier flexibility when they have that hybrid approach. Even to what you've always just saying with like potential out of stocks or them not ordering, et cetera, this does allow you to have a bit more of a safety net in place.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Needless to say, having more two cars versus one is always better. Being hybrid, I can't think of one negative dynamic that would come out of it. If I was a 1P brand, I would absolutely want to be hybrid and have a backup 3P store to do my product launches with, to have as backup inventory if POs are getting placed. I'm trying to think of any cons. I would say that one of the cons is still, that if Amazon's got the buy box, you still lose that pricing control until you run them out of inventory and can have your 3P buy box pick it up. But Andy, can you think of other cons of a hybrid dynamic?
You have to be careful with your 1P relationships and ensuring that you are still being respectful of that. They typically would like to keep all business on 1P for the most part. So you'll just want to make sure that you are being respectful of that. You're completely right about the inventory, potentially even advertising as well could get a little mucky. So you want to have a detailed plan in place, which we actually outline that in a couple slides from here.
Yeah.
Great segue, Yuval, for those,
Yeah.
but yeah.
That's a good call out. It does add complexity. You need two advertising accounts, one for your 1P, one for your 3P. Of course, Amazon vendor team will not like the fact that you have a 3P store because it's revenue taken away from them and they're measured on their own revenue.
Yeah. So how do we determine 1P versus 3P? What's the actual math that we do to determine this? Like we've given you some, larger statements, but in the end, we make data-driven decisions with our partners just because a couple of percentage points on millions of dollars can make all the difference. So when we look into this, we go and see unit economics plays a big part into that when we think about what is the difference between putting out 100 units versus 10,000 units. That really impacts the overall operational impacts. Selling unit velocity, how quickly it goes, how fast does the SKU actually move, where do you need to be actually nimble to react to seasonality versus a consistent burn, your organizational competence of just where you guys are and have the skill set in-house to be able to take on some of the things like returns or customer service. And then consignment fit, that is also just how your ability to kind of fill FBA. But then I think the other one that's a really big one, and this was on brand side, is cash flow and inventory risk. With 1P, you do get this beautiful thing where they will go and potentially order 2 months worth of inventory right there, and that looks really great on your P&L. Though, like if you are having to go and then put in, if you're doing 3P and you have to go and put in 90 days worth of inventory that you're not getting paid for, that could really make your P&L look really bad. And you might need that cash sooner. So those are definitely considerations of your internal cash flows and how you would need your money from Amazon to be coming into your business. And then just marketing conditions and share as well will also kind of play a factor.
Yeah, unit economics can be really different. Andy, we got a number of questions that are pretty good that we can tackle
Sure.
right now. So I'll come and list them out. From Amy, we got, what about born to runs? You can push inventory in with 1P. So absolutely, born to run is the only lever that you have to essentially trigger inventory floats into Vendor Central. It comes with certain caveats. I don't know if you have any other inputs on that one, Andy, that come to mind.
No, Born to Run is definitely it's a phenomenal option when it actually aligns with the units. But I've also seen where brands have wanted products to be in Born to Run and could not get it in there. So that is just one of the considerations. If you could get it in there, beautiful. If you can't, we got options.
Your product will not always be eligible for born to run.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then do we see hybrid accounts buy box being impacted when they're competing between 1P and 3P?
Not if you do it right. That is the thing. You want to, one, have very clear lanes. You don't typically want a 1P and 3P offer on the same ASINs. You would want to have your 3P products be completely different ASINs with different trajectories and measurements of success versus your 1P. So you want to keep those lanes very separate. This one will help with you guys not fighting over buy box. It'll also allow your advertising to be a lot more effective. You can be running them out of each one of your respective accounts, but that way you're not competing against each other. So we really think that we measure twice, cut once, where you want to be very intentional with who goes where.
And 1P will take preference. So if the price points are at the same level, 1P will have the bind box by default. If you've got competing same products on the same listing, then you'd want your 3P listing to be a little bit more expensive than your 1P, perhaps to prevent that any issues from happening. But theoretically, usually what you do, the point of a hybrid is not to have the same products on it, it's to essentially differentiate the business model. So you sell the SKUs that are more efficient on 3P and the SKUs that are more efficient on 1P, and not
Mhm.
have as much overlap. Of course, again, Vendor Central is not going to like that because that's profit. If you're taking the more cost efficient ones, they will also be more cost efficient for them to sell in 1P. And so it definitely creates a little bit of friction, and that being able to balance that's important. So you have to make, I think you have to be selective with what you do there and not be too volatile with your decisions, or they will
Right.
get on their radar.
Which oftentimes we see that different product groupings or categories fit into different ones based upon the economics as well. So
Mhm.
some lower price point items typically would go into this bucket versus other higher price point, et cetera, where the math is different would go into that, which actually, if you go into the next slide,
One more quick, awesome question. Have you ever seen 1P block 3P items from being launched on a 3P storefront?
yes, I've definitely seen that before. They oftentimes will want to get first dibs on new products. So oftentimes you want to keep close to chest what you are actually releasing.
Yeah.
So with this, I think one of the biggest other aspects of when you are thinking hybrid or just in general is thinking of the financial breakdown of the different models because these numbers can hit very differently depending upon the product size. And then your margins could look completely different, wherein sometimes 1P could actually be more profitable and sometimes 3P could be actually more profitable. Vendor is a wholesale margin. They do have co-op and marketing accruals, freight damages allowances, chargebacks, in payment terms, typically 60 to 90, like I was saying, leans more on the 90, which I'm just seeing with the overall contracts. 3P, you get about a 15% referral fee. This can differ on some of the respective categories, go down to 8%, especially in footwear. So, but in general, 15 is a good rule of thumb. FBA fees, unit size weight. Now that's important based upon your products, because once again, if you have the heavy freight items or et cetera, that could look different. Monthly storage fees. Now, this is something that is one, you are not only have that inventory that's not being sold sitting in a warehouse, so that hits your P&L on a certain degree, but you also get a monthly fee from them. Typically, it's not that much until you hit that long-term storage. I have seen brands margins just get destroyed by that long-term margin or long-term storage fee, just because it goes 10x. So if you have slow sellers and you're hoping to go and have that product make it to the next season, etc., you have to keep a clean house with them, which then also goes into just like if you are needing to remove product from FBA, so you stop accruing those storage fees, that could be expensive as well. So depending upon the seasonality, depending upon your inventory position, these are things that we factor in for which model makes the most sense because if not careful, those can destroy the margin. If you go to the next slide.
And by the way, I feel like this is a similar challenge with Vendor Central, but Amazon places the POs, they ask for the inventory, but then as the inventory starts to age, do they come back at you with frustrations about this aging inventory that they ordered? Like, isn't that their job? What's happening there, Andy?
Oh, 100%. And that is like, so there is the total different side of 1P inventory issues, which is if you do not help sell through their aged inventory, they're going to punish you with future POs. And they're going to go, well, I have this inventory that I bought a year ago. And so I'm not going to go and buy your new product line until you get this done. And so oftentimes we have to spend advertising dollars on the 1P inventory to help sell through to go and unlock
Yep.
additional POs for the new product lines.
Yeah,
So,
which I find this perspective a little bit frustrating on personally on my end. Amy had another question. This is interesting.
mhm.
So let's say we have six colors of the same $15 product. Just half of them are in 1P, the other half are in 3P. Would we recommend bringing them all to 1P for profitability? I really don't like this dynamic. generally speaking, because ultimately it's the same parent ASIN, it's the same listing, they're just color variations. And what's happening in this scenario is one ad account is promoting the 1P, one ad account is promoting 3P, or one ad account isn't getting credit for the sales happening with 3P potentially from an attribution standpoint because it's not coming, the conversion isn't coming from the same vendor advertising account. So this, you're adding a lot of complexity, and I'm not sure what the benefit of having it hybrid really is. Andy, I don't know if you have a different perspective on that one.
Uh, for colorway, you're right. I mean, I guess we would need to look at the image or the advertising plan of like how they're driving that traffic. It might not be that big of a very or issue if it goes and cannibalizes on the colors, but to your point, it
Hmm.
could get messy versus the respective upside.
Now, yeah,
Um,
now if you're not advertising those products, less of a concern, um, I would say for sure.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Uh,
this is kind of a breakdown. If like you have $100 price point item, what this could do to your respective margins. So you see with the wholesale, you're already starting at $60 of your 100. And then when you add COGS, co-op, et cetera, you're getting about 22%. Versus when you see 3P, it's going to see, okay, start with 100, you go and do the COGS, that 15% referral fee that I was referencing, FBA fulfillment and storage. Now, it seems too good to be true. Why? It's almost like double the profit. Why wouldn't I do this? This just, even if I sell less units, it doesn't matter because I'm so much more profitable. That's where the FBA fulfillment and storage fees could really, really vary. I've worked with products where their fulfillment fee is 35% of the product's overall price, due to a low price point item. It's a $20 item, but you're having to pay $5 for shipping. The math all of a sudden gets different. Storage fees as well. This is something where if you all of a sudden finish up your season and you have quite a bit of inventory still in Amazon fulfillment centers at that time, all of a sudden this 8% could turn to 15 to 20% if you're not careful. So if you properly manage these and you have a good solution for them, you can make a lot of margin, but it's something that we like to factor in when making recommendations to people on which model makes sense.
So one of the things I really dislike about this, if you look at here, you got the 37% margin on 1P. If I look at here, I've got 38% margin. So if I look at it from a percentage standpoint, it's like, oh, it's the same dynamic. And finance will often make that mistake. They make a decision based on kind of, hey, what is the profit percentage? But if I look at it in dollars, there's a huge difference. 38 versus 22 is a significant delta, even though the percentage looks very similar. And often the percentage on 1P looks more attractive because you have a lower denominator here of $60 instead of the ASP of 100. Um, and that's why 1P P&Ls are preferred. In my opinion, completely the wrong decision because ultimately it's about how many dollars you're bringing in. The percentage is very misleading, in my opinion.
Very much.
Let me see if I can get rid of this thing so I can move on. Here we go. Oh, it stays on. Interesting.
Oh no, you're like a toddler that broke in the fridge.
There we go. All right, go ahead.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so with this, I really do need to speed it up. The narrators are telling me that we are already behind, so my apologies. I'm a bit of a gabbergoose. But with this, we also will go and kind of when you are thinking about potentially transitioning from one to the other, you're going to want to start breaking down your products into different buckets of their ability to kind of transfer over. You're going to have some products that are transition ready. They have they like 1P doesn't have any of the inventory. It's a new product. You could just launch it. Easy go. That's bucket one. Two is where you might have to do some catalog migration, like actually kind of switch over from vendor, get your seller central set up, and make sure that you have those variations in a good spot. So you can't really be able to properly transition those until that is done. Advertising ready. That is also something that during these transitions, you never want to go and have your advertising um, drop a beat. So you're going to want to make sure that your new platform is going to be able to take on the responsibilities of advertising before you transition it over. So that is a factor that you need to kind of go into, and then sell through first. And that is if 1P does have a heavy inventory position on a certain ASIN that you eventually want to sell to 3P, you need to factor in their sell-through rates before you start to have an active offer. Because you don't want to be having your 3P offer on competing with their 1P. Just one, they're probably going to get the buy box. Two, you're just slowing down the overall journey.
And of course, you need Amazon vendor approval to do that kind of transition as well. You need to have that clear alignment and work with them to get through that process.
Okay, so different kind of considerations this kind of goes into, and these kind of lead into the prior buckets that we're identifying, which is just one things that you're going to be wanting to answer when you're coming up with these transitions: catalog and listing control. Who holds the listing authority today? What is that going to look like in the future? Inventory and cash flow handoffs. Now, this is really important. Like I was on the brand side and I did have to go through switching over from a 1P to 3P transition. And one thing that I had to work with my board on was, hey, Amazon has 2 months of inventory that we're not going to basically get any new sales or POs for 2 months. And that really messes with the brand's P&Ls, and oftentimes something that we would have to explain to our board that we were going to do it just because Amazon was such a significant part of our revenue stream. To go 2 months with no sales equivalent as Amazon selling through their inventory position, it was a big consideration for my brand. So that is something that you guys will want to potentially factor in when making some of these decisions.
Absolutely.
Um,
Moving to 3P will create cash flow delays during that transition.
100%, 100%. Okay, when moving from 3P to 1P. Once again, this is oftentimes when you do have those high velocity products. When I was a brand manager, my ultimate sign of respect is when my brands were starting to get poached by 1P for that, because you are typically a category leader, or you could help you with that. You need accelerated growth. And pricing and volume is less of a factor when it comes to actually setting the price, but you're more about how many units sold.
hmm and by the way, we've seen horror stories of brands going from 3P to 1P. There is risk involved. I'll give you an example. And a brand actually went under in doing so. They transitioned from 3P to 1P because of the cost savings that could be incurred and the promises that 1P made around growth. And then what happened was the market rose their prices and they couldn't sorry, the market dropped their prices. They couldn't remain competitive and lowered their prices accordingly. And as a result of that, they lost a lot of sales velocity and lost their market position as a leader. That's a very unfortunate outcome. So that's where being able to control your price is really critical in surviving in a dynamic business environment. So this is something that I really didn't expect was going to happen, unforeseeable, but just highlights the risk of sometimes going to 1P and giving up some of your levers.
Mhm. And that's why we really like to go and look at it from all those respective angles, and really kind of, you hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst on those type of situations, because there is a certain degree of risk that um, you got to factor for.
Yeah.
So moving 1P to 3P, more often than not, it is number one. Is you're getting squeezed by margin, crapped out items, etc. It's just every year, Amazon typically comes back with their contracts, taking another point here, taking a point there, and after a certain point, you just kind of hit that where the marketplace doesn't make sense unless you actually need to move. The other one is they are upsetting your other major retailers because they are selling at a price that your other retailers do not, and you need to get that pricing control back. And then also, to Yuval's point, unreliable POs. It is so uncomfortable for brands that are especially seasonal to be going, oh my gosh, when are you doing this, Amazon? When are you going to do this? When are you going to do this? And it not coming in. In certain scenarios, it's almost a weekly conversation with some of our partners because it is stressful. But
hmm
Once, but in other scenarios, it makes things a lot more.
Yeah. Well, the irony is I see a lot less risk, virtually very, very little risk moving from 1P to 3P from a business standpoint. A lot to gain and very little risk. There's a lot more risk of going 3P to 1P in terms of the loss of leverage that you incur. I've never seen significant issues. As long as a vendor is aware and is giving you the blessing of making that transition, you have very little to worry about. And you're even able to maintain your subscriptions, which is really critical for consumables. Those are managed within brand analytics. You're able to transfer those to your 3P account, and you have no impact there on loss of subscriptions, which is probably one of the more concerning considerations for a consumable brand transitioning. We had a question here that came up if 99% of your products are tied to Walmart and Target, and then you got the pricing dropping there. Is it one people just match price? Not always. Sometimes they're going to think that they're not profitable and they'd rather not sell the product. So you will lose the buy box and the products will not be sold on 1P, or you can't advertise them either. They'll not let you advertise it. So it's not a good strategy. It can lead to negative dynamics over time, and it needs to be resolved before it can do more damage, in my opinion. It will impact your velocity, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, they'll completely. I mean, they even have bots that are like scraping prices for light items. So I've seen like where they're looking at a 3 pack, even though on Amazon they sell a 2 pack type of thing. And so they are oftentimes scrutinizing that and they'll try to hurt you if they're seeing a lower offer on a different competitor.
Mhm. Yeah, you're
So,
blamed for it for sure.
yeah. So with that, just once again, as we were kind of alluding to throughout this presentation, or advertising handoff. Even though while you're doing this behind the scenes, your consumer should not be experiencing any difference. Your overall sales, your how you're showing up in the marketplace should not look any different. So this should all be behind the scenes. And so with that, advertising and how you go between the two is very, very important timing wise. We do recommend about the ads kind of running simultaneously for about 2 weeks. This will go and result in your advertising costs going a little bit higher up, but it does also ensure that there is no drops. During that as well, you'll want to export all of your vendor central search terms and advertising product reports if you are going to go from 1 to 3P. Um, uh, just because that is very valuable data that you wouldn't necessarily have in seller. Make sure you're protecting your top non-branded terms with aggressive exact match. And then just once again, factoring in who owns the buy box at what times and how that's tying to where you're sending the traffic.
Yeah, yeah. The advertising piece is not too complex. The most important piece is making sure you transition the right products being advertised from your 1P ad account to your 3P ad account. And then you don't lose sight of that, which products have had a buy box change so that you don't lose any kind of advertising momentum as a result of the transition.
And what we typically see with this is it's about a 90-day journey, start to finish. Though we do probably would like to buffer in an additional 30 to 60 days. Once again, you hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Sometimes you might have to submit different cases that might take a couple more additional weeks. So we just kind of factor that in. But during that time, we are exporting out all of the vendor central important reports that we can be wanting to fully leverage, get your seller central account up and going, build out any FBA listings if necessary, and then start monitoring that buy box as well, because you might have listings already there, but you now are going to be having a competing offer, and you're not going to be Amazon that's going to be able to just trump them.
Yeah. Yeah, and the
Um,
way the transition works, if you're 1P going to 3P, the seller team and the vendor team within Amazon will meet. We typically coordinate a meeting and to get alignment and approvals internally. That can take a long time. That can take anywhere from 4 weeks to 6 months to get that clarity, depending on the focus that there is internally and to get those things accomplished. So those timelines will include the internal alignment to get the green light from Amazon Vendor Central to transition, which is really important to reduce any complexities.
Wonderful. And this is just how Nectar helps. So have you been kind of during this presentation, I've been talking about how we work with our partners during this journey. We actually have quite a few partners that are going through from 1P to 3P or vice versa. Vendor negotiations, kind of determining what the hybrid model kind of works for our respective partners. And that's a part of our account management service offering. That is something I kind of oversee quite a bit. But once again, we're in these conversations probably on the weekly. So we are also very comfortable with this very kind of scary dynamic phase. Something that we see on the regular. You retail media, that's that lovely advertising, ensuring that there's not a drop beat. I alluded to our creative services, ones I'm very, very proud of, based in New Jersey, our digital marketing, D2C, Meta, Google, influencer, etc. We love for those guys to help influence these transitions through outside traffic and just bringing new awareness to new listings. And then Ideride Analytics, where that is our Rosetta Stone. Data allows all of these respective departments to speak to each other, creating one comprehensive strategy.
If you don't know where to start with 1P, 3P valuation, the best place to start is a financial analysis. What does my profitability look like on 3P? How does that compare to 1P? And how much saving or incremental cost would I incur in each model? That becomes that kind of motivator within the organization, whether you want to make a change or not, is kind of the first step, in my opinion. That's where we start. Anytime a brand says we want to change, the first step is a financial evaluation of the models.
Love it. Key takeaways from this whole entire journey. One, there is no universal answer. There is quite a bit of complexity to this. And with this, use data, not your gut, as things can really shift from respective product lines, shipping, storage fees, etc. And that can really help influence what model is the right for which products. Hybrid is increasingly a smart play, allows you to have that flexibility of kind of getting the best of both worlds and protect. If you transition, protect your engine. Once again, I've said this a couple of times, but you hope for the best, prepare for the worst. You always want to have that safety net in place and to ensure no drop balls. I have seen, unfortunately, multiple times where brands think like, I could figure out this fulfillment thing. I'll go. And then they start to move forward out of stocks. I mean, I've had it where a brand lost probably like 3 million in top line sales due to out of stocks due to this transition. So with this, we minimize any type of risk by always thinking multiple months in advance and planning that out, and
Mhm.
definitely recommend as well.
And that shouldn't happen. I mean, the scenario is an operations team dropping the ball here in forecasting. One thing to mention we didn't call out. If Amazon blocks you from going to 3P, do you have any recourse? And the answer is yes. You could go, there is you could work with a reseller to essentially sell your products on your behalf, and stop selling to 1P, and eventually you can open your own store. It's not the preferred way of going about it. You're going to give up margin by working with a reseller as well. Um, but that is a card that a brand can play. All right, Andy, that was great. I really enjoyed discussing this topic. One of my favorite topics to talk about, as we always want to bring more levers to brands and increase profitability, and that's 1P 3P is a very meaningful lever that should not be ignored. Thank you.
Oh, real quick, from Amy. So there, with the respective products, they do have an FBA calculator on the Amazon website, that will allow you basically to put in your dynamics and or your product dynamics, pricing, etc. And it can kind of give you a projection out of what that unit profitability will be. That could be your 3P kind of journey. And then with 1P, it is just your kind of the math that we kind of showed behind, like with that
Mhm.
wholesale and then the COGS, et cetera. So that one would be a little bit different. I don't know if you would be able to see your co-op fees. That kind of gets.
No, I mean the co-op fees, if you're on 3P, how much would it be on 1P? You wouldn't have those. Those are negotiated when you start having
Mhm.
conversations with Vendor Central. Typically you could assume like a 20 to 22% co-op all-in fee. It will change depending on if it's glass, if they're big and bulky, but I think that's a fair assumption until you get a firmer number. And then you can't ignore chargebacks and shortages. These are usually minor, maybe 1 or 2%, but they do exist. And also they can vary based on the category and the nature of your products. All right. Well, thanks everybody for your time. Really enjoyed. And Andy, it was awesome to hang out and talk about this topic. Should do it
For
again.
sure. It's been a blast. Thank you all so much for coming and joining us.
Bye, everybody. Have a good week.